You are once again welcome to Evangelist Imakalu TV, Treasury of Excellent Knowledge. This is a new topic. I am just beginning now with the caption, Secret Life of the Catholic Church. And this is part one of it, as that is the beginning. It is a topic I will continue to come up with. So this is just the beginning of it. Myself and many others have been talking about the secret life of the Catholic Church. And this secret life of the Catholic Church is about the negative secrecy of the Catholic Church. The majority of the Catholic Church members will controvert about this matter, because that is how they have been trained to always defend the Catholicism no matter what. And it doesn't matter, they don't even care to know whether what they are defending is right or not. To them, it doesn't matter. All that matters to them is that it is a Catholic family, it is a Catholic movement, it is a Catholic interest, it is a Catholic unity, it is a Catholic conceptual supremacy. So that is how an average Catholic Church member is trained to think and to act. However, there are few neutralists inside of the Catholic Church who cannot really defend the Catholic Church holistically, and they pay attention to listen to people like us with divergent opinions, divergent reasons, divergent exposures, divergent revelation, and the fact and the figure in regard to Christianity, religion, Jesus Christ, the Bible, God, and what are expected of us as the church that are different from the Catholic institution, from the institutionalized Catholic methodology and the doctrine, dogma, and the tradition. Then, thirdly, I want to say that there are a high number of the Catholic Church members who are there with their plain minds, with the hope and with their relaxed minds that they are just members of the church, but do not know there are attempts and the ungodly things, ungodly activities, ungodly agendas that are going on the background, being carried out by the leaders of the Catholic Church, starting from the Pope to some extent of the subordinates in the Catholic setup. So, and there have been in several occasions, in some of my videos, in which I say that the Catholic Church is owned by the Illuminati. So many people cannot get it clear, but continual disclosure of proofs and activities that are from this occultic kingdom called Illuminati will begin to substantiate more and more what I have been saying, like myself, like many others. I am not making this video up only to just be so critical, or it is not about hateful criticism to the Catholic Church. It is about bringing the reality to the awareness of humanity, and for us to know exactly what the church should believe, to be real, to be following the right path, and to know the direction we are going, and to know who are causing the problem in the Christendom and who are bringing the solution in the Christendom. So, and when we really understand what Christianity is all about, we will be able to understand who are the true Christians, who are the false Christians, who are bringing falsehood into Christianity, and those who are handling Christianity with doctrinal integrity. Then secondarily, moral integrity, as all of us are required to do. So without talking so much, I will go into playing the video, because the video I'm going to play is a 30 minutes video. So I will play it to the full. In the end, I will also give a brief analysis to round up the program. That's the video. Life Between Two Worlds. That is the name of the channel from where I got this video. So I'm going to play this video. This video is by the right hand side, Why the Olivet Prophecy, Matthew 24. My book in regard to the science heralding the end time, heralding the end time and the return of Jesus Christ for the rapture. The Olivet Prophecy, Matthew 24. So I am going to place this video now. Then I will analyze it briefly. Then the program will end as I just said.
My name is Esteban Morales. I am 58 years old, and everything I have lived until today has brought me here. Writing this account on a forum for the first time, I never imagined I would reach the point of needing to share my experience with people I might never meet in person. I was a priest for over 3 decades, a life dedicated to the Catholic Church, proudly wearing that tight white collar around my neck, which seemed to symbolize both faith and respect. Today, I no longer wear a cassock. I no longer have a church or titles. All that remains for me is a strange silence and a fear I can't quite explain. I am not writing this to attack anyone's faith, but because something happened to me, something I could never properly explain even to myself, and I feel I need to share it before it suffocates me. I remember that when I entered the seminary, at just 17 years old, it wasn't exactly out of love for God or a sincere vocation. I saw in priests, especially those who came from Rome, a kind of power, an almost divine respect from the faithful. They had gold rings, wore clothes that seemed tailor-made for untouchable people. When Monsignor Ruiz entered the church in Guadalajara, I was just a poor boy, watching those purple vestments drag across the marble floor and the faithful kissing his hands as if he were Christ himself. I wanted that, not holiness, but respect, authority. I grew up with a simple mother who always repeated, God.
The Newland collection is designed for who embrace style, elegance, and uncompromising.
We are really happy to have a global partner, Papaya. When we were looking for a partnership, we were
provide, but I wanted something more concrete than just prayers and tortillas. My ordination was a strange day. I cried a lot that day, but not out of the spiritual emotion everyone assumed. I cried because I felt I was finally entering a world that had always been denied to me, a world where influence and respect came naturally with position, without needing money or a famous surname. Little did I know that step would lead me, years later, to see something that would forever change my perception of faith and the church. In my first parish, in the center of Guadalajara, I quickly learned that the altar was not the only sacred place. I was introduced to meetings with businessmen, politicians, donors. It was all part of pastoral work. They taught me to bless homes, but also to bless contracts, to guide the faithful, but also to attract investors with promises of blessings in exchange for donations. It was a game of appearances. I preached about humility while wearing silk, spoke about the kingdom of heaven while riding in armored cars. That became routine, as if it were normal. And the more I was applauded, the more I stifled that little voice deep down that told me Jesus would not have walked like that. But the church validated me, and that was stronger than any doubt. Over time, My name began to circulate, and I was recommended for a stint in Rome. They said it was recognition for my mature spirituality, but I knew that, deep down, it was for my loyalty and ability to keep silent. I arrived at the Vatican thinking it was the pinnacle of faith, the heart of the church. But I found something very different. The corridors were cold, silent, full of closed doors. In the first few days, they forbade me from celebrating Mass, from preaching, even from asking questions. Here, first you listen, then you serve, they told me. It was there that I met Monsignor Vittorio, a man with a constant smile and eyes that seemed to never smile with it. He was the one who later introduced me to the ceremony that changed everything. The oath of silence, taken in an underground chapel with no images, no crucifixes, only a stone in the center and 6 priests dressed in white. To this day, what I saw there haunts me. We promised there to keep absolute secrecy about everything revealed in that circle, with the justification that it was in defense of the unity and authority of faith. That phrase never left my head. Does faith need protection? Or is something else being protected? At the end of the ceremony, they gave us a ring with an ancient seal, without a cross, without a name. It's not to show, it's to remember, they said. And I remembered it every time I witnessed something that tied my stomach in knots. From then on, I began to understand that the visible church is just one layer. Behind it are agreements with governments, meetings with bankers, financial reports where the word evangelization appears as an expansion goal. I started to feel strange. Everything I thought was sacred seemed to be part of a well-orchestrated strategic game where God's name was currency. One afternoon, leaving a doctrine study session, I overheard 2 bishops talking. One said, "If the people knew how we decide what is preached, we would lose not only credibility, but power." That word, power, kept hammering in my head. I began to realize how much of it existed in the structure I thought was purely spiritual. And it was as if something inside me began to break, slowly, like cracking glass. The voice of conscience grew stronger, but I tried to silence it with theological justifications. Unity is more important. Not everyone is ready to know certain things, but a part of me no longer bought that. Every time I read the gospel at night, lying in my cold cell, I felt something was off. Until one day, they called me to a more restricted ceremony. They only said it was something reserved for a few. I didn't know it, but that would be the beginning of the end. I was led through corridors I had never seen. The walls were of dark stone, marked with ancient symbols I didn't recognize. We descended a spiral staircase that seemed endless. The air there was heavy, dense, hard to breathe. When we arrived, there was a round room with no windows. In the center, a dark wooden strongbox with 2 iron padlocks. 5 cardinals were already there, all serious, saying nothing. Monsignor Vittorio approached with a golden key, murmured a phrase in Latin that I didn't fully understand, and opened the first padlock. The second was opened by another cardinal, an African man with visibly trembling hands. When they lifted the lid of the strongbox, I expected to find relics, perhaps ancient manuscripts or something spiritual. But what was? There were folders, simple paper folders, some with dates, others with seals. One of them had something I will never forget, the papal coat of arms with the inscription, "Reserved Absolute," in red. Monsignor Vittorio opened that folder with extreme care, as if he were handling something alive. He read a few pages in silence, and then, without saying anything, beckoned me with a gesture. I approached and read too. In a few pages, I realized that this was not just a financial report. It was a map of a system of hidden investments with companies, properties, and funds spread across the world, all indirectly linked to the Holy See. There were unknown legal names, clauses in contracts with governments, astronomical figures. But what shocked me most was seeing expressions like redefinition of concepts of divinity, harmonization of sacred symbols, and renunciation of theological exclusivity. I felt a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about money. It was about doctrine. It was about reconfiguring the Christian faith in the name of global unity. I felt dizzy. I wanted to ask what it was, but no words came out. When I managed to tear my eyes away from those pages, I realized that everyone else was already leaving. No one explained anything to me. Not a word. Only Monsignor Vittorio placed his hand on my shoulder before leaving and said in a firm tone, "What you saw today, you did not see. What you know, you do not know." I returned to my cell without understanding how my body could still move. I spent the entire night awake. I read the Gospels compulsively, almost desperately, as if trying to grasp some truth that had not yet been touched by all of it. I remembered the passage where Jesus enters the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers. For the first time, I understood his fury. That was not just a biblical memory. It was a scene that made sense now, in light of what I had just witnessed. I began to wonder if the temple had become a den of thieves again, only now with cardinals' robes. In the following days, everything outwardly seemed the same, but inside me, it wasn't. I performed my duties, attended meetings, listened to speeches, and smiled when I needed to smile. But it was all automatic. I felt nothing anymore. I started to avoid people's gaze. I felt ashamed, not of what I saw, but of the role I myself had played for so many years. Because deep down, I too helped support that system, even without knowing all the details. I tried to convince myself that perhaps this was part of a larger strategy, a way to adapt faith to the new world. But every time I thought about it, I remembered the words of the gospel. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And what I saw seemed to be trying to erase that they, that unique. They wanted to transform the gospel into one of the options, not the truth. This gnawed at me from within, as if my soul was quietly cracking, without screams, without scandal, but ceaselessly. By then, I started to avoid even the convent chapel. It was as if every golden crucifix, every stained glass window, every Gregorian chant echoing through the corridors had lost its meaning. I felt out of place, as if I were the only one there seeing the crack in the floor. One day, I went down alone to the smaller chapel, hidden at the back of the gardens. It was a simple, almost forgotten space, with old wooden benches and a crudely carved image of Christ in dark wood. I knelt, but I couldn't say a word. I just stayed there, heart racing, eyes wet, and a question pounding in my mind. Lord, am I still serving you? Or am I serving something else that uses your name? The silence I received in return was stronger than any answer. It wasn't the comfortable silence of prayers. It was a heavy silence, the kind that confronts. From that day on, everything I did seemed loaded with doubt. I was tasked with reviewing liturgical texts for a new publication. The goal, they said, was to adapt the language to be more inclusive and contemporary. So far, it seemed common. But when I started reading the drafts, I was shocked. Where before it read, Jesus is the only way, the truth, and the life, they now proposed, Jesus inspires us on the path of shared truth. I closed the document immediately. My hands were trembling. I repeated that phrase in my mind a few times as if I wanted to make sure I wasn't exaggerating. Inspires? Shared truth? This wasn't softening language. It was removing the essence. I spent the rest of the day restless. That detail, however small it seemed, was to me clear evidence that the plan was not just financial or political. It was spiritual, and not in a good way. It was a slow, subtle substitution of truth for a version acceptable to everyone, but loyal to no one. I couldn't stay silent. I kept that manuscript, went down to the library, and sought out Father Leon, an older Mexican theologian whom I greatly respected. He had served in difficult missions and was known for his wisdom and direct manner. We walked together through the cloister. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't have the courage, but I let slip that I had read something that kept me awake at night, that was starting to make me doubt if the system truly represented Christ. He looked at me sadly and said something that chilled me. Esteban, the walls here have ears, and silences don't protect the innocent. He said no more. He just walked away in silence, as if he had given me the only possible warning. The next day, I found an anonymous envelope on my bed. Inside, a single typed sheet with a phrase, "What is unsaid saves lives. What is revealed buries them. Guard your soul and your tongue." My hands went cold. That same night, I gathered my courage and searched every corner of my cell. Behind the wooden crucifix hanging on the wall, hidden neatly between the frame and the stone, there was a small device, a microphone. I was being listened to, perhaps since the first day. At that moment, something inside me broke completely. I stopped feeling merely in crisis and started feeling watched. The following days were strange. I began to notice that accesses that were previously open to me were blocked. Some priests started avoiding me, whispering when I approached. One of them intentionally said aloud as I passed, "Father Morales seems a bit distracted. Perhaps he needs a spiritual retreat, a long one." I was on high alert. I slept poorly, dreaming of empty cathedrals and Bibles with blank pages. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding. I no longer knew if it was my faith that was crumbling or my sanity. The breaking point came with a phone call. It was a neutral male voice simply saying, "Father Morales, your transfer has been requested. A retirement home in Switzerland for rest and spiritual evaluation. Immediate departure." I didn't even respond. I just hung up. I knew what that meant. It wasn't an invitation. It was an exile, a warning disguised as care. And perhaps, if I didn't obey, the next step would be complete oblivion. I picked up the phone and called a childhood friend who now lived in Oaxaca. I didn't explain anything. I just asked for help. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "You'll have a roof here. Come alone. Bring the bare minimum." That night, I started packing my bag. I put in only one change of clothes, my mother's Bible, and a photo of her, still young, praying before the altar in our childhood home. As I was closing the bag, I heard footsteps outside the cell. They stopped right in front of my door. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They just stayed there, in silence. I did too. The next morning, I dressed in ordinary clothes. I took off the oath ring and wrapped it in a white handkerchief. I left it on the table. I walked through the convent corridors like someone saying goodbye to something that was once a home, but was now a prison. I took a train out of Rome. I changed carriages 3 times. At another station, I bought another ticket with a false name. I didn't know if someone was actually following me, or if the fear was already too deep inside me. I crossed borders with borrowed documents. I slept in cheap guest houses. I avoided places with religious symbols. Every time I saw a golden cross or someone in a cassock, I lowered my eyes, not out of respect, but out of fear. It was there that I understood what it means to be a fugitive, not from human justice, but from the lie I myself helped build. A fugitive who doesn't flee from faith, but from the farce. And deep down, a voice insisted, "Now you are truly close to the truth, because it costs, and you are paying." When I arrived in Oaxaca, I was no longer a priest, not even an official fugitive. I was just a tired man with a small suitcase and a heavy soul. My friend took me to a simple house in a neighborhood where the streets didn't even have names. The living room had a table with 3 chairs, an old stove, and a Bible in the center, worn from much use. No one there called me father, nor did they ask why I had come. They just said, "You are welcome here. Here, we just want to truly seek God." That disarmed me. I spent the first few days silent, sitting at the back of the meetings. There was no altar, no pulpit. It was a group of simple people gathered under a blue tarp, praying with fragile, sincere words. Those prayers, without formality, without elaborate liturgy, touched me in a way I had never felt. It was as if, after so long talking about God, I was finally hearing him. I started helping however I could, carrying chairs, setting up tables, cutting bread. Nobody wanted to know if I had studied in Rome. Nobody wanted me to explain the 7 dimensions of Christology or debates about councils. They wanted presence. They wanted to pray together. They wanted someone who would cry with them. And for the first time in many years, I cried, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Once, an old woman told me with a smile, "You have the eyes of someone who got lost, but also of someone who doesn't want to go back." And that was exactly it. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go back to that structure that I now understood no longer represented the gospel that had once captivated me. Here, amidst the dust, the rice and beans, and the calloused hands, I rediscovered Jesus. And he wasn't in the golden domes or the secret meetings. He was there, sitting next to the woman praying for her alcoholic husband, the young man trembling as he asked for prayer, the elderly man weeping as he read a psalm, Over time, I went back to reading the Gospels, but now it was different. I read without obligation, without thinking about homilies, without looking for elaborate interpretations. I just read, like someone reading an old letter from someone they still love, even after everything. And everything began to make sense in a new way. Jesus didn't walk through corridors with gold tapestries. He walked among fishermen, lepers, invisible people. I realized that for years, I had represented a distorted image of Christ, not the one that touched the poor, but the one that remained distant, protected by the authority of the office. And that realization hurt. It hurt a lot. I started praying in a more sincere way, not with beautiful words. Sometimes I just said,
Por cada segundo viendo este anuncio, podrías ganar 12,50 euros. Llama en 4 segundos, ya llevarías 50.
and that was enough. Because for the first time, I felt that prayer didn't need to be heard by an audience, only by him. And he was listening. One night, after a prayer meeting in a vacant lot where we had set up an improvised tarp, I stayed there alone, looking at the sky. The stars were clearly visible. And there, looking up, I said softly, Lord, thank you for letting me fall, because only in falling did I learn to look up. And perhaps that was the greatest miracle of my whole story. Not an instant healing, not a supernatural vision, but the chance to start over, to live faith cleanly, without masks, without an audience. I began to understand that perhaps the church Jesus dreamed of doesn't have marble columns or golden domes. Perhaps it is made of broken but willing people, of sincere tears and tables where bread is broken without ceremony. And I was there, in the midst of it all, no longer as a leader, but as one of those who need. And it was exactly there that I felt closest to God. A few months later, I met Lucia.
She appeared at the end of an outdoor meeting, waited for everyone to leave, and approached with a notebook and a direct gaze. She said she was a journalist and a Christian, and that she had heard about an ex-priest living in hiding in Oaxaca. I didn't come to expose you. I just want to understand, she said. I didn't know what to answer at the moment, but I invited her to sit down. We talked in the shade of a dry tree. She didn't press. She just listened.
I spoke little by little, without a script, as if I were unburdening myself for the first time. I spoke of Rome, the oath, the strong box, the document. I didn't give names or dates. I just shared the weight that all of it had left on me. Lucia listened with tear-filled eyes. At one point, she put her pen in her lap, closed her eyes, and began to cry. Not from scandal, but from pain, a real pain, like someone realizing that something they always believed might not be exactly what it seemed. When I finished speaking, or when silence spoke for me, she simply said, I thought I was going to do a story, but this isn't for the newspaper. This is for knees. We stayed there, silent for a long time. The wind blew softly, and the rustling of leaves on the ground seemed to respect the moment. In the end, Lucia turned off the recording, closed her notebook, and looked me in the eyes. I won't publish anything, not because the world doesn't deserve to know, but because God hasn't asked me to tell it yet. And that phrase marked me more than anything else, because it confirmed something I was already beginning to understand. There are truths that should only be revealed when heaven authorizes them. And until that time comes, they need to be lived in silence, like a cross that is not displayed, but carried. Lucia came back other times, no longer as a journalist, but as a sister. We prayed together. Sometimes we just stayed in silence, and that was enough. After Lucia left, everything became quieter, but it was a different kind of silence, not the kind that hurts, that presses. It was a light silence, as if I was finally at peace with no longer having to prove anything to anyone. However, the world I came from didn't take long to react. I didn't file a complaint. I didn't show documents. I didn't give interviews. I just disappeared. But that was enough to spark rumors. They started with subtle messages. People from the old parish saying they prayed for me, that I must be going through some spiritual crisis. Then came the blockades. Seminary colleagues who once called me brother stopped responding. Some even posted indirect comments on social media. Beware of those who abandon the truth for strange voices. I didn't respond, not out of fear, but because I understood that the gospel is not defended in arguments. It is lived. And it was there that I began to see the fruits. One day, a young mother prayed for her sick child at a meeting under a torn tarp. No one shouted. No one laid hands on her. We just prayed together. The following week, she returned crying with the test results in her hands. The boy was cured. On another occasion, a drunk man came in asking for food. He left on his knees, reading a psalm aloud. I, who had celebrated masses in halls full of politicians and ambassadors, now wept seeing an illiterate woman kiss her Bible as if it were Christ himself. And it was. He was there, lost among those the system had left behind. I discovered that spiritual authority is not in a ring, a special chair, a signature. It is in kneeling beside another's pain. And no one taught me that in Rome. It was here, among the forgotten, that I finally understood what it means to represent Christ. Sometimes fear still came. Fear that one day they would knock on my door. Fear of being discovered, of being forcibly removed, of being silenced. But soon after came a strange peace, as if an inner voice said, even if they come, they no longer have power over you. Because now I owed nothing to any system, only to God. One day, one of the young people in the group asked me, don't you miss your old life? I thought for a moment. I remembered the golden halls, the diplomatic dinners, the locked documents, the cold words spoken in beautiful robes. Then I looked at him, with his torn notebook on his lap, his sincere eyes, his unadorned faith, and replied, I missed nothing that kept me away from Christ. And that was true. Because when we lose everything we thought sustained our faith, that's when we begin to see what truly sustains it. I never told everything. Not to Lucia. Not to anyone. The document I read in Rome is still kept inside an old envelope, hidden in a cloth-covered box, in a corner of my small adobe house. Sometimes I take it out, not to read, but to remember. Not like someone revisiting a secret, but like someone touching a scar. It no longer bleeds, but it still hurts. Lucia kept her word. She never published, never hinted at anything. And I continued living as if none of it had ever happened, at least outwardly. Inside, everything changed. But something began to catch my attention. People were changing too. Without knowing my story, without access to any secret, they began to seek something purer, more real. Churches emptying of formality and filling with true hunger for God. It was as if the Spirit was acting separately, without waiting for approval from the hierarchies. And there I understood. Perhaps God never needed my scandal, only my obedient silence. In a small neighboring town, I was invited to a prayer meeting in a simple adapted shed. 10 people, an open Bible, an out-of-tune guitar, and no liturgy. Just hungry people. A woman began to pray aloud and said, Lord, deliver us from structures that do not represent you and bring us back to our first love. That gave me chills. They knew nothing about me, nor about what I had lived. But they were praying exactly for what had kept me awake for years. I saw this happen in other meetings too. Young people saying they were leaving churches that promoted spectacles and neglected compassion. I saw simple people opening the Bible at home and teaching their children to pray without needing formulas. I saw the gospel flourishing among the broken, among the weary, as if God had decided to act quietly, without applause. And that's when I realized, maybe no public outcry is necessary. Maybe the truth was already spreading in another way. I remember one dawn when I woke up for no reason. I went out into the yard, looked at the starry sky, and felt something I hadn't felt since I was ordained. Presence, a silent certainty that the kingdom was near, not as a threat, but as comfort. A little girl, about 9 years old, once said during a prayer, Jesus doesn't live in palaces. He lives where we let him in. That disarmed me. Because yes, he lives where they let him in, not where he is represented with titles and expensive robes. Today, I understand that my mission was never to tear down the system, but to be a sign that it is possible to live faith in another way. And that way doesn't need authorization, only surrender, only truth. I no longer preach in cathedrals. I read the Bible with children under a tree, tell the stories as one who lived them. And when they ask me if Jesus was afraid, or if God hears quiet tears, I just say, yes. Here's everything. Today, my house is made of mud and wood. The roof leaks. The water doesn't always come with pressure. But every morning I wake up in peace. I carry bricks, help build shacks for displaced families, share what I have. My hands sometimes bleed. And when that happens, I remember Christ's hands. And I smile. Because now I understand that serving is not wearing a linen stole. It is getting dirty for the pain of others. On Sundays, there is no mass. There is shared bread, psalms read with effort, prayers whispered by people who can barely read but know heaven intimately. No one calls me father. They call me Brother Esteban, or just the man who prays with us. And I prefer it that way. Because now, finally, I don't represent an institution. I just try to reflect the man who one day called me by name, and whom I almost betrayed with my obedient silence. Almost. I wrote all this not to cause scandal or to accuse. I wrote because perhaps you too are wounded, confused, disappointed with a faith that smells more of power than of forgiveness. Perhaps you have already wondered where God is amidst so much pomp, so much structure. If so, let me tell you, he never left. He's just not where they want to trap him. He's where they let him in. You don't need an altar to talk to him, nor a ring, nor a nice suit. You just need a sincere decision. Open the Bible as if you've never read it. Talk to him like someone who is lost and wants to return. And if, at some point, something inside you burns, don't be alarmed. Perhaps it is he lighting what they tried to extinguish. I am no longer a priest. I have no pulpit, no audience. But today, finally, I am a free man. And because of that, I can say with peace, I'm done. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been disappointed by something that seemed like faith, but was just a facade? Have you ever felt that something was wrong even when everyone said it was right? Your experience can help other people, so share it. And if this type of content speaks to your heart, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next stories. Here we don't bring spectacles. We bring truths that transform. Want to support this project and don't know how? Click the join button down here. It's a simple way to strengthen the channel and be part of a community that seeks more than appearance. It seeks essence. And don't leave yet. Soon a recommended video will appear on the screen with another real story that will open your eyes and strengthen your faith. See you next time. Stay with God and see you later.
So that's the video. It has come to an end. He was a Catholic priest. He was a Catholic priest, yet he was in religious bondage inside of the Catholic Church. What am I pointing to at? What am I pointing to in essence? Church is not the guarantee for salvation. Church is not the guarantee for freedom. The religious politics, which is headed by the Catholic Church all over the world, does not lead to salvation. And the titles, religious titles, the positions anybody or any people can occupy, false religious supremacy or religious connection to the world, all these things do not really determine godliness. They do not determine the real Christianity. They do not determine the progress of the covenant between God and the church. As I speak, many many members of the church have derailed from God's purpose for the church. So many churches are being hijacked by socialists, by politicians, by the globalists, the business mafias, collaborating with the politicians, collaborating with the socialists. And what they run is no longer Christianity. What they run is socialism, occultism, merchandise, disguising them to be religious and Christian. But in reality, they are not connected with Jesus Christ. They only use the name Jesus Christ. They use the name Christianity. They use the name titles. They use the name church. They call on the name God to make themselves appear to be real, while in essence, they are not real. They are false. As I speak, the majority in this kind of churches are the ignorant and the victimized majority. The ignorant, then victimized majority. I am talking about let us be real in what we are doing. Let us face reality in regard to what Christianity is all about, in regard to what the church stands for, in regard to how to identify true church from false church, the living church from the dead church. Because as I speak, there are a few churches that are really still being led by the Holy Spirit. The majority of the churches today are not being led by the Holy Spirit. They are being led by different kinds of demons. And these are the dead churches. The living church is the church being led by the Holy Spirit. And they are very, very few. Using the Catholic Church as an example, there are many churches that are run with different names under Pentecostalism, but they are not real Pentecostal churches. They are not the living church. They are not part of the living church. They are not the living branches of the church. They are dead branches of the church. Because as I speak, many occultists are going around establishing churches. Many of the general overseers we are looking at, so, many of them are witches, occultic members. Many of them also collaborate with the politicians. So it is not limited to the Catholic Church, but I use the Catholic Church to make the topic of this lesson because the Catholic Church is dominant in regard to this. The Catholic Church are the people ruling the world, including Donald Trump. So these are the secrets many people do not know, including Donald Trump. All of them, they are members of the Catholic Church and they belong to the different and the same of occultism. They are working together, they are collaborating. Then relating to the Bible revelation, we cannot forget to reflect on the message Jesus had delivered about the 10 horns of Apocalypse, the 10 most powerful world leaders coming together to collaborate with Lucifer. All these things are going on now strategically. There is another topic I began. I think I made it part 1, part 2, or part 1 to 3 and stopped. And then sometime in the future, I will go back to that topic. That is one world religion in process. So that people will not continue to be disillusioned. People will not continue to be blindfolded let us open our eyes, because all these things are affecting everybody. There are people who are connected and they are being enriched through the religious colonization system, but that does not also help them. They can be rich, but spiritually and in regard to their salvation, they are losing it. There are many ignorants who do not even benefit neither riches nor the way to salvation by joining the system. And that is the system of the Antichrist gradually developing and will be championed in the religious sector. It will be championed by the Catholic Church as I speak. That is what is going on. And in the political sector of it, it will be championed by the world most powerful political leaders from different countries coming together to have their meetings to decide. And we can see this priest opening up to say that he thought he believed he belonged to the right place, only for him to realize that he belonged to a party where Christianity is thwarted, distorted. So it is a structure built to appear as if it is the practitioner of the real Christianity, or a church representing the real Christian church, representing Christ, while it is a different thing altogether. They are just using Jesus Christ, as I've said earlier, to cover themselves up. Then the practices are different things. The practices is occultism mixed with socialism, then mixed with religiosity. All of these things is aimed at convincing and carrying everybody along. That is the end. And it leads to occultic, social, political, and satanic colonization. So a time will come when those who will be exposing this ongoing iniquity will be persecuted. High persecution is coming up. However, those who have made up their mind to stand for and to stand with Christ should not give up. You should be discouraged. You should be encouraged. You should be encouraged. Pardon me. You should be encouraged. Never be discouraged. Equip yourself. So this kind of program I am doing is preparing people. It's about preparing the people ahead of what are yet to come. Preparing the people, the mind of the people, building you ahead of things that are yet to come. So the end time is drawing near. All of this happenings, they are part and parcel of the announcement of the end time, until the time will come when all these things, all the prophecies will be completed. Then the return of Jesus Christ will take place. So don't remember the book, The Olivet Prophecy, Matthew 24. This is about learning about the events announcing the end time and the return of Christ. Understanding and executing righteousness. With this one, you learn the fundamental principle of the Christian life. The fundamental principle of the Christian life. Then it is beneficial to relate in every other aspect of life, socially, religiously, Christianly, even industrially. Lost and their problems from points of reality. So lost and their problems. Then for you to know the problem of the problem of living a greedy life, a non-contented life, the problems it attracts, then polygamy and its problems. These books are some of my tools, some of the tools I have built up for educating people, in regard to Christianity, the real Christianity, and also how to practice the real Christianity, to become real in life, to live the real life, and to achieve the real result. So when you begin to learn all these things, then you begin to develop yourself very well on how to relate with God and relate with humanity properly. It still benefit you in every area of life. So may God bless you. These books are available in Amazon. They are also available in my bookshop at number 1 Comprehensive Road by Ujogu Street, Aba, Abia State, Nigeria. I remain your serviceable servant, evangelist, Inimakalo, until I come your way once again. I say